Back on topic, if we can. Final hour of the show. It's News Talk 600 KCOL. Political consulting organization called Constellation Political. I found some fascinating information out there on their website, and I wanted to talk to him, and I want to bring in Ben Engen onto the program. Ben, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Jimmy.
Ben, let me ask, I found the data on your website. It's back from February, and since February when the legislature started getting into mode here in the General Assembly in Colorado, up until now, Governor Polis is signing some of these bills. I can't tell you how many of my listeners or emailers have said, my God, the Californians are screwing up this whole great state. It used to not be this way till the Californians migrated into the state. And you broke down some numbers, you did some research, and I guess the question we'll start with is, are all these people that say Californians have ruined the state, are they telling the truth?
I would say they're about 25% correct. I mean, this is one of those cases where the common wisdom seems to actually line up with the data. You know, we've had about, call it 450,000 people move into Colorado from other states since 2004, and of the 450,000, 100,000 of them have been from California. And who do you think they're sending?
Yeah, who are they sending? Is there a way to track their voter registration? Are they? Because you'd think they're sending the middle class getting chased out of that state because the elite. But is that the case?
So there's a way to get a rough sense of it, and mostly what they're sending us is unaffiliated voters. Most of the growth in Colorado's voter registration over the past decade has been in unaffiliated voters. But, you know, we know how those people are voting. Unaffiliated voters consistently break against Republicans, whether they, register Democrat or not. They're still voting Democrat.
So they're fleeing the state of Colorado over the last many years. About 100,000 of the 400,000 plus have come from California. They're having to flee the state of California for some reason. I guess it's safe to say, Ben, that they haven't figured out that the policies they voted on back there are why they're having to leave the state. I mean, that's the great disconnect. You flee one state because of repressive policies out there, and you come here and you vote in the same thing you had there. You scratch your head.
Oh, I mean, it's, the average voter just doesn't make that connection. And you can say, oh, well, maybe they're just getting tired of California for some other reason. But you look at the next two states that have sent us the most people, it's Illinois and New York. Between those three states, they're almost half of all the people who have moved to Colorado. And they're all three states that are dominated by the left. But, folks just don't make this connection. They leave there and then they vote for those same policies here.
Now, let's talk about migration out, because I've heard people say, and all the good people are leaving the state. Everybody wants out of the state. And I've heard that after the John Hickenlooper signed the Bloomberg gun bills and the limited magazine size. I'm going to leave the state. Is there any evidence that people are leaving the state of Colorado that have been here for years?
Oh, yeah. And we're not losing nearly as many people as we're gaining. But we are losing people. And, it's folks like myself. I actually sat down and started looking at this because I was thinking about leaving the state. And it's interesting to see the places we're losing to are traditionally Republican strongholds, places like Idaho, Montana, Utah, Arkansas, and Wyoming, just north of us here. So you can see as the left is moving in, it's pushing some of the old West Republicans out of the state into some of these other Western states around us.
Wow. That's Ben Engen. The ConstellationPolitical.com is the website. I'll link up to this. Ben, if you hold real quick, let me take a quick break. I want to come back and wrap up this conversation with you. But if you've been saying that Colorado's being ruined by the Californians, you're 25% right, because that's 25% of the migration coming into this state have been Californians since 2004. We'll talk more with Ben for just a couple more seconds in just a moment. It's News Talk 600 KCOL. Jimmy is my name. If you want to jump in, we'll also move to an open line portion of the program here in a bit. 866-888-5449, 866-888-5449. Feel free to jump into the conversation. Can I give an invitation? on, let's see, what is this? June the 15th, coming up just 10 days away. The Larimer County Republicans are going to be presenting and hosting their 25th annual Lincoln Day dinner. Special guests include Andy Biggs, Congressman from Arizona, Colorado Congressman Ken Buck, also the chairman of the party for Colorado, and Iowa Congressman Rod Bloom, all going to be there. It's dinner, silent auction, live auction, and some great lineup of speakers and entertainment. June the 15th at the Embassy Suites in Loveland. Get your tickets, 25th Annual Day Lincoln Day dinner. VIP tickets have been marked down to just $100 per individual. You can also buy up a whole table and things like that if you want to do that. But again, a VIP treatment for $100. Just go to LarimerGOP.com, LarimerGOP.com, and yeah, get a ticket and be there June the 15th, Embassy Suites in Loveland for the 25th Annual Lincoln Day dinner, LarimerGOP.com. Back in a moment, talking about the migration into and out of the state of Colorado. Who is it that keeps screwing up this state? Stand by. More to come. News Talk 600 KCOL.
Hang tight. Jimmy Lakey will be right back. News Talk 600 KCOL, where we only deliver real news.
It is Lakey on News Talk 600 KCOL. The website ConstellationPolitical.com, Ben Engen is one of the consultants there. And the research you can find from February about Californians moving into the state of Colorado and has this caused the Californication. Bill Engen and Constellation Political have been consultants for people like Doug Robinson, who I endorsed in the gubernatorial primary back last year, and unfortunately Doug didn't win. Probably might be my fault, but he's worked with Doug Robinson. Ben, you work with political candidates, and obviously in Colorado, knowing that these migrants are coming into this country from places like California, Illinois, and New York, they're not connecting their dots. Is there something that political candidates or political parties should be doing to help people connect the dots? Because if they don't learn from their mistake, they'll continue to make the same mistakes that they did in their previous states, are going to continue to make those here. Is there an educational component that a candidate or someone can do?
Well, you know, as tempting as it is to say, yes, we should try and get them to connect those dots, I think it's asking a lot for people to do that. You know, we especially, and I'm sure all of your listeners, are a little weird in that we're interested in this to begin with. I mean, think about the level of engagement in politics that you really see in Colorado. You know, our high watermark for Republican caucus attendance was probably in 2012. We had about 75,000 people show up. And that's kind of the first step of getting engaged. That's less than 10% of the registered Republicans are even taking time to get involved in choosing a nominee. You know, trying to get unaffiliated to wrap their heads around, you know, some of these policy implications. I'm just not sure that there's a candidate or a campaign in Colorado that's ever going to have the resources to do that.
So how do we fix this? I mean, obviously we're a blue state now. We've become a blue state. I would say we're blue, not purple, but some people still call us purple. Is it a lost cause? Are we seeing any way to turn the tide? If we can't get people to connect the dots, what do we do?
I think we've got about 2 more cycles, I would say, before I would really consider writing Colorado off statewide. I think we've got we have a shot in 2020. We have a shot in 2022. But the problem is, we as Republicans do a very poor job of minding the store between elections. I mean, there are things that we can and should be doing, like simply going out and registering voters. If you go look at the Secretary of State's webpage, you can see the list of organizations that are approved to register voters. At any given time, there are probably 10 times as many Democrat-aligned organizations out there registering people as there are Republican ones. And now that we've just passed automatic voter registration, this acceleration in Democrat and unaffiliated registration is only going to get worse unless we proactively get out there and do something about it.
And you mentioned these private organizations that are. I've held this contention for a long time. Republicans, every couple of years, they freak out about who's going to be their party chairman. And on the Democrat side in Colorado, no one knows who the party chairman is because it doesn't matter, because they implemented the blueprint years ago with Rut Bridges, Jared Polis, Pat Stryker, and that crowd. Is that the type of thing that we're going to need? And if so, that takes years to develop that kind of infrastructure.
Oh, I mean, this is one of my great pet peeves, is everyone goes out, reads the blueprint, says, oh, yes, we should do this, and then they light their hair on fire about who's going to run the state party. I mean, the real lesson of the blueprint is that the state parties in Colorado are pretty irrelevant now. Campaign finance has completely neutered them. And if we are going to compete, we do have to have a stronger independent expenditure network. But what a lot of people don't realize is that we already have that. The state party kind of led the country in setting up its own IE arm. There's a board of directors who oversees an independent expenditure committee there. And then our leadership in the state House and our leadership in the state Senate both have sizable independent expenditure committees that are dedicated towards taking and keeping our state House and state Senate seats.
I guess we look at it then, on the Democrat side years ago for the blueprint, you had Pat Stryker, Jared Polis, Rhett Bridges, a couple of other names in there that really just said, here's a blank check, let's get this up and rolling. Is the problem the fat cats that could support such an effort for the Republicans in Colorado? Is their checkbook just not open? Have they not been asked? What's the delay here?
It's a little bit of that. If you look at this last election cycle and you kind of total up the money that was spent on the campaign and the affiliated IE side, almost all of our deficit in spending came from Jared Polis himself. Apart from that, we were about at parity with the Democrats in terms of the money that we spent across our different competitive races. I think the thing that's really missing more than some of these rich donors taking out and writing a check is one of them stepping up and providing leadership. Years ago, that actually used to be Bruce Benson before he went on and became the president of CU and got, kind of checked out of politics. Back then, he used to provide leadership amongst the donor class and say, these are going to be our priorities. These are who we should give how much to. And now we just don't have that kind of central leadership anymore.
And then, as you said, everybody lights their hair on fire every 2 years as to who's going to be the party chairman. And I'm thinking, really, this is what we're going to focus on. My guess is Ben Engen. He has a group called Constellation Political. Their website is constellationpolitical.com. They have a blog. Let me ask you another question. President Trump, his approval ratings across America are doing well. I think there's an underreported group of people that will support him. I think he's looking good for 2020, except in Colorado. Is there a play, in your estimation, the voters of Colorado, is there a play for President Trump in 2020 in Colorado?
No, I don't think so. He is doing well in the rest of the country. There's just something about, some of our western states here where I don't think he does as well. Like here in Utah in particular, he just doesn't poll very well. And like you said, we are drifting rapidly towards being a blue state, and this just isn't a place where I think his campaign is really going to have a shot. That being said, I also don't think you can hang all of our poor outcomes that we've recently had around his neck like some people want to do.
Yeah, I think if you were giving your critique, and you can be as personal as you want to, because I've been quite personal. I think a lot of our candidates in Colorado in this past election cycle ran very kind of poor campaigns. I think they thought it was 1995 or 2005, and they didn't realize that you got to do things a little bit differently now. And I think President Trump illustrated you have to run different types of campaign. Where did we go wrong? Let's start at the top of the ticket, and let's say last year. Where did we, as a consultant, what had you screaming on the sideline?
Well, I mean, there were a couple of things, and the biggest thing is what we touched on earlier, and that's the blueprint. What we really saw in this last election was not just a random blue wave. It was the culmination of a plan that Democrats set in motion over a decade ago. They were planning for the long term. They've slowly been making gains, and then you couple it with, kind of a bad year for Republicans, and it just turned into an onslaught where we just had everything get swept away. And then beyond that, I hate to say this because it's such a trite analysis. It was just a matter of message. You look at Walker Stapleton, great guy. Obviously was a big supporter of him after we lost the primary to him on Doug's race. But, his campaign's message was basically, I'm not Jared Polis, which Jared Polis's message was, great, I know, vote for me. So, there's an old saying, you can't beat something with nothing. And that was really part of the problem we had.
One more piece of an analysis, and I know I've gotten you off the previous, where I said we're going to go on this thing was the migration, but I found it fascinating to pick your mind as a consultant, is we also, 2 years ago, we had a U.S. Senate candidate that I think was Darrell Glenn, that I thought that was kind of a poorly run campaign as well. Not run campaign, but it just, the messaging never got on. The message there was, I made a great speech at the convention, but that doesn't mean anything. Do Colorado Republicans have kind of a why is it that we seem to pick what I believe are maybe not the strongest candidates in the field? What am I missing here?
Well, we certainly have a bit of a self-destructive streak, but I think there's a deeper problem there in that we don't have a pipeline to advance the next generation of leaders. And that's true at the level of our elected officials and also at the level of our political operatives. You know, there's no consulting or political operative talent in Colorado either. And part of this is because of campaign finance. And then on the political side, our politicians, our bench really kind of ended with Cory Gardner. And we've had such a rough go since then that we don't have any new up-and-comers that people can really get around and get excited about. So you have a fellow like Darrell Glenn who, a lot of people didn't know who he was, but they weren't that excited about anyone else. So he gives a great speech at the convention, and all of a sudden he's the nominee. We just haven't done a good job of building the pipe.
Yeah. I've often said, because I'm always saying I give the best political advice ever. If people will listen to me, we'd win some races, but I'm a talk show host, not a political consultant. So let any of the candidates know if they need political advice. I got it for them. I can tell them how to do it. I've got it all down.
Done.
All right. Ben Engen, it's fascinating conversation. I appreciate you taking the time. This California migration is fascinating. That we're not just making it up when we say Californians are ruining the state of Colorado. So you say about 2 election cycles. What do we need to do in those 2 election cycles before we're a lost cause?
I think the biggest thing is we have to start focusing. We have to look downstream, maybe even as far downstream as city councils and school board races, but definitely downstream enough to winnable legislative seats and start grooming the next generation of candidates who can go on and win statewide, making sure that they're successful. And then at the same time, we have to be registering Republicans, and we have to be reaching out to new groups, especially young people. And this isn't hosting events and trying to get them to come. We have to go and show up where the voters are. We don't have to win any hearts and minds, but we just have to start being there. And that's all stuff we can be doing before the next election.
ConstellationPolitical.com. They have a blog there. You might want to check it out if you kind of geek out on some of these numbers and studies like I do. That's a great place to go for the inside of politics and what it looks like out there. Ben, thanks for your time, sir. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jimmy. You have a good one.
You as well. Ben Engen, ConstellationPolitical.com, ConstellationPolitical.com. All right, let's do this. Let's take a break here. I'll come back. I'll